It appears we are live. This is Rebel Rock, the weekly talk show of punk rock and history of punk rock. This week, we are joined by Dan McCool, former frontman of the River City Rebels.
Hey there, guys. Good to be here.
Well, we're excited because we're going to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Playin to Live, Living to Play.
Word. I mean, what a great record. 20 years. That's unbelievable.
20 years. Yeah. It's really crazy. Well, time goes by fast.
It does go by fast. And we're, for the next hour, we're just going to break it down. We're going to talk about all there is to be talked about with Playin to Live. And I'll be honest, I listen to that record maybe once every year just to kind of, be like, oh, I just want to remember a little bit. There's a lot of issues with it, but there's a lot of good things about it. And I listened to it today before the show and found out there's some stuff that I noticed that I had never really noticed before.
Whoa. You always know it's a good album when you can find new shit 20 years later.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's new shit, but it's just stuff that I didn't put a whole lot of value at the time. Now that I in retrospect, I'm like, you know what? There is something there. So yep. How should we start this out? I mean, should we start by talking about how we wrote that record?
Yeah, I think it would be kind of cool. Maybe go in from the record before going into this, like at the tail end. Okay, you finish the first record going in.
Well, so during those days, what would happen is we were pretty much a part-time band. We would just play on the weekends. We would tour, maybe in the summer for a few weeks. And pretty much we were trying to write records as we were playing weekend shows. We didn't rehearse a whole lot, did we, Dan?
No, the members were really spread out, so it was really hard to rehearse those days. We'd be lucky to get a rehearsal in a month.
That's what I thought, and all I can remember is when, and essentially it was a small window, as like a 6-month window to try to write a new album while also promoting the last album.
Yeah, pretty much. It was pretty high octane. We had that deal with Victory, and I think it was like a 5-record deal, right? So we kind of wanted to pump them out year by year. So that's, in a lot of ways, the record you can kind of hear that a little bit, and I think it like teeters between kind of an urgency and a kind of franticness almost to the record, from what I kind of remember from it. It's like I think the planning of it, the rehearsals for it, the writing of it was very much done on the fly, and it's always been like kind of my question of whether that was a good or a bad thing, like when you listen to the final product of the record. But anyway, we can get into that later. But yeah, I mean, the point being, like, it was we did it on the fly. We did it from like several different, I think we were in like 3 or 4 different states when we did it. So
yeah, well, I what I remember of that process of writing was that I was coming up with a lot of the music, and I would kind of have it demoed or rehearsed out. You would drive up, everyone would get together. You'd have some sort of recorder, and you would record the rehearsal and write lyrics, and then come back, a few weeks later to the next rehearsal and try to sing through a shitty PA that we couldn't really hear. So we had no idea what you were coming up with. Right? Isn't that what you remember as well?
Vaguely, yeah. Well, I had like, what do you call it? Not a, it was a recorder. It was like a disc, mini disc recorder.
The mini disc.
That's right. Yeah. And I think like we were just so used to playing, I mean, you figure, I don't know how old I was, like 20 or so, maybe 19 or 20. And, just coming out of like your sort of teenage years, you're mostly playing in Knights of Columbus, VFW halls, things like that, people's basements and whatnot. And so the kind of idea of getting a professional rehearsal space with kind of like a good sound system where you could hear yourself and it was crystal clear and everyone could sort of like vibe off each other's parts and stuff. That was kind of I think that was probably something that happened later in our musical lives, like when that was kind of expected, where we'd sort of work on that. So I think like, yeah, like you said, it was kind of a shitty PA, kind of like a distorted sound. And I think we were kind of just trusting each other, that whatever we were coming up with beneath that white noise was good, you know. So
yeah, because we weren't really doing proper demos back then. We weren't doing multi-tracking, like, which happened later on in the process. But those days, yeah, you're pretty much like a rehearsal recorded through like whatever, you know, you'd have that would sound like shit because everything was distorted. You couldn't hear vocals. So
yeah.
pretty crazy that that album turned out, I think, song wise. I mean, you can tell a lot of this stuff is kind of bare bones, but I mean, sometimes that works, sometimes it didn't work, I think.
Yeah, it's open to interpretation. I feel like, I mean, you talk about 20 years, that's enough time where you can have like kind of a good like a good sample size of, you know, sometimes I listen to the record and I'll be like and I don't think I've listened to it for quite a while, but you know, you sort of go back every couple of years and put it on and you're like, oh, this record's great, you know. And then a couple of years later you listen and be like, oh man, this record needed a lot more work. This needed like a year of writing, a year of recording, you know, probably some time, you know, mixing and mastering that we didn't have for it. So yeah, 20 years is a long span to kind of like experience what a record is, you know, and so I've had different views of it over the years, you know.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. You know, there's definitely moments, and there's tracks on the record that I think, you know, sound great, and there's other ones where I'm like, God, if we could have just done this different, all these different perspectives on what was happening and what could have been. So going into that album, we went and recorded at the same studio that we recorded Racism, Religion, and War in Stoughton.
Right. Yeah.
And this time we had a bigger budget. You know, we went from $5,000, I think, to, was it 10,000 or 7,000?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, now that you say that, it's kind of like a very vague memory. I think it was somewhere around like 7,000. Yeah, that sounds right. It was like not. It was not the full 10,000, but yeah, it was in between. Yeah.
So it gave us essentially probably about a 10-day span somewhere.
And for, you know, for anyone still recording records, that was not a lot of that was not a lot of money for
even back then. Yeah.
Yeah, for a project of that scope. I mean, I was like, there was other bands on, you know, particularly on the label that we had and everything else that were getting a lot more, you know, at the time. So I think we did what we could with it, you know.
And that was in Massachusetts, right? In Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, I was in a town where it's kind of just a weird random thing, but the Outpost, which is where, you know, we recorded the first record there, and it was kind of like the Boston's recorded there, and like the Ducky Boys and Dropkick Murphys recorded Blood for Blood, a couple albums there, and you know, we it happened to be down the street from where me and Brandon went to high school. Yeah, kind of like a totally random thing, and it was across the street from another place called 49 Monk Street, which was an old venue that we used to go to in high school, where like the Dropkick Murphys would play for like 10 people. You know, like at this place, like in the basement, they were kind of just like this, like oi band basically. And then like you'd have, you know, a lot of Boston bands kind of come down and play for the suburban kids, you know, the Unseen and, you know, Ducky Boys and things like that. So it was kind of like this weird block in Stoughton that just had this like storied punk rock, you know, kind of history to it, kind of unassuming suburban street. But yeah, and then we met you guys like, and just, like you guys lived, you know, 300 miles away, but still that's where we did the records. So, but
yeah, it was very odd, the fact that you guys were from that area and that you guys were in a separate band doing a very similar thing to what we were doing when we first got together on Racism, Religion, and War. I mean, you guys just came in to play horns essentially.
Yeah, we were kind of like the kind of like the tag along horn players. I feel like, you know, when we first got there, it was and we you know, when Brandon and I first went up there, I mean, I had actually, it's kind of weird to say, but I had actually never been to Vermont before. You know, I just never had I just never been up there before, you know, and like, so it's kind of these merging of the two worlds, you know, back then. I can still kind of remember the feel of that, you know. But yeah, we somehow made like this band work, even though we were like across New England and people were in college and other people were like, you know, in different parts of their lives. And I think the music really brought it together. you know, and we just had a fucking blast. I just remember like how fun, my God, like those shows that we played in those early days, you know, small towns, you know, particularly the ones in the small towns, you know, like we had venues that we play, you know, Middle East and, you know, stuff like that once in a while, but like just the small town DIY shows were just unforgettable, you know, the energy in the rooms.
Well, yeah, that first time we played Drake at Mass, and all of a sudden the kids were on board with us. That was a game changer.
Yeah, Drake it. It's like what a strange.
That was it. That was the show that was like, wow, there's something happening here. Like something.
Yeah, it was a beautiful time, because that's pretty much around the time when I really started going to shows, you know, early 2000s, 99, 2000. And it was kind of like I tell people, the rise before social media. So like punk shows were our social media. So it was really cool. And I, you know, seeing you guys down here play Rutland a couple of times, and Dana Rec Center, I think, a couple of times. And then there was something out at a VFW here too, and I'm not quite sure what happened when you guys were supposed to play, but I mean, we're talking a long time ago. So
I don't know. I don't recall.
It was probably a really, you know, stressful situation, whatever.
Oh, absolutely. The way these shows are booked.
The fact that every single weekend we were booked up, where we would just take Friday, Saturday, Sunday shows anywhere we could, and I had a planner out. I just remember like going through this planner and having it all ready to go. So we drive to Pennsylvania, then on the way back, hit up Albany, you know, just those kind of routes. We go down to DC, which to me is the show that I remember so well. We drove all the way down to DC to play one show in front of like 10 people.
Worth it.
Dan, are you talking about the show that got canceled because of a bomb scare?
No, did they have a bomb? We still played. It was windy and shit. We played to like no one. And you played Radiohead all the way back.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I remember about the whole time. And I kept farting, and everyone's getting fucking sick.
That's right. I can still smell it when that album comes out. Making those associations. Yeah, I was really big into like OK Computer at that time. That was kind of fun.
Well, it's one of my favorites, because I can thank you for that, because it was that night that it did something to me, but it was like embedded in my brain from there going forward. I hated Radiohead before them. Yeah,
I mean they were revolutionary, you know, and that's the other thing about the Playin to Live album. I feel like is something I think about sometimes is, you know, that was a really interesting period of music. You know, we're coming out of the late 90s, right? It was sort of like punk had sort of become popularized. You know, punk was on the radio. You had like Rancid and Green Day and Offspring and things like that. But for the most part, most of the people that like we went to high school with were into like boy bands or like Limp Bizkit, right? It was kind of like a lot of rap rock, and I feel like we came around with the first record, which I was only kind of half a part of. Like, I mean, we sort of came in the middle of that recording, Brandon and I on the horns, but the Playin to Live record was like an attempt, I think, to fit into. I remember like around 1999, 2000, there was a lot of bands getting together. Almost all of them had the word city in it. We were one of them. And it was like rock and roll is coming back. That was like the big thing in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like enough of this, you know, like kind of like overproduced, you know, kind of like new metal stuff, like old fashioned rock and roll, like Springsteen, you know, kind of stuff. Even kind of like, I remember like, when I was a teenager, like punk rock kids hated Guns N' Roses, right? But like Guns N' Roses became popular again in certain circles. I don't know if this sort of rings a bell with you, but like that's kind of what I remember. And I remember Playin to Live being some attempt to kind of like to kind of take that influence and go in and write tunes like that. Like this is rock and roll. What it ended up really being was the kind of lo-fi stuff. Come 2002, 2003, it was like the Strokes and like White Stripes and things like that. It wasn't this like kind of ballsy, you know, like bassy kind of Americana kind of stuff. It was like but that's what I remember.
I think, yeah, it was our take. We were meshing like the street punk sound with a Springsteen attitude, and trying to channel that in, which that was pretty early trying to channel that. Later on, we'd figure out how to do it. But during that time period, for the most of us didn't understand how to make that kind of shit happen. We were still very bare bones. So it was like, you know, a little bit of the influence, maybe subject matter and lyrically, definitely the way it was phrased, and there's stories there. It's, you know, it's all about just having that salvation to play music every week. And that's what you live for, essentially.
It definitely came through as a listener, like hearing it for the first time. I definitely felt that, well, growing up in a small town myself, like I could feel, you know, all those vibes about, you know, I was getting into music, you know, taking a guitar, just going out. I used to go to Boston, like in my high school band, because everyone after high school went to Berkeley. So I would take the bus from White River down to Boston. So I would have this record on, and it captured that vibe in like 2005 when I graduated, you know, of that. So let me set the scenario. So you guys, you're in the studio. Do you guys remember kind of what the layout is to do the record? Do you do all the guitars and drums together? How did you do it back then?
I don't know. Dan, what do you remember? I mean, I remember the one thing I remember gear-wise or whatever is we used the same bass cab that like a lot of the other records at the Outpost were recorded on. So like Blood for Blood had used the same bass cab. I always remember thinking that was cool. And I probably Dropkicks or something, but yeah, I don't really remember much of like the rig or the setup or anything or the
I mean, we recorded live, but everything was separate. You know, the bass was in a closet, like sealed up. I was in a separate room recording guitars. Everything was divided, but we were playing live. I think the horns were overdubbed, vocals were overdubbed.
I was in the big room. I remember that. The one where you face everyone, and it's like next to the trash can where everyone broke bottles. Every record that was at the Outpost had people breaking bottles with bricks at the bottom of the Rubbermaid trash cans. So
was it a full like 7 to 10 day thing? Do you guys remember you guys to stay down there? Did you just stay down there and just do it all in a week, pretty much, kind of long week, or remember how that went?
Yeah, we did stay down because we stayed at, was it your house, your parents' house in the basement?
Yeah, we stayed in my parents' basement.
Oh, sick.
It was like this old like grimy basement with like plaid carpeted flooring, and it was kind of, you know, and I remember we had we wrote out the tracks, you know, we like figured out the track list order and everything in that basement, and just, you know, my folks would like make, you know, food for us and stuff, and that was in Bridgewater, which is a couple towns over from Stoughton.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love small details like that about how it went and kind of the time frame it took, you know, with the budget, because a lot of bands sometimes don't get that budget from a label where, okay, did you feel like you had a little bit of extra time to do what you wanted? Did you feel rushed, like compared to maybe doing a record without a budget, like in bands prior? You know, did you feel like you had some time to do stuff like musically that you wouldn't have if you didn't have a budget?
I mean, I thought we had it nailed down because we had done the first record there, so we knew exactly what we had to do, how the timing was going to work, and we had a little extra money that time, so it was like it was fine. There was more than enough time to get everything done, I thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, I think the recording itself was done in a pretty like timely manner, but I think the writing and everything around it and the kind of the gelling of the band, the gelling of the music, is, I think, something that probably takes like a year if you have a whole new slate of songs, you know, just to kind of make it organic, you know. So I think we were doing some writing in the studio, not a lot of it, but we were doing probably a little too much writing in the studio, or producing in the studio, as it were, right? Like we were kind of just deciding on the fly kind of what something should sound like. I think we had, you know, I think we had like a tiff with Jim, the guy recording it, at one point. he kind of threw up his hands at one point. And
Well, I mean, that was based around me, 100%.
was it? I don't even remember the
it was because I had this like vision, because going into the process, I hadn't heard you really sing on anything, because the PA that we had worked with, we didn't know what it was going to sound like. So I remember you doing the first take, and I was just like, man, I envisioned something a whole lot tougher and rougher. And I remember just being like, you know, can we do better? Can we hit it harder? And I remember Jim, just the engineer producer, just really being pissed off. So I just went upstairs and like isolated myself. And I was like, fuck it, whatever, do whatever you guys got to do. And that really pissed him off. And that kind of fucking sabotaged the record, really, because once the album was done recording there, he normally would mix it, but he was like, I'm fucking done with you guys. Take your record, bring it somewhere else. So then it was shipped to Chicago,
right,
and mixed and mastered without us even being there. So that's why you don't hear horns. The drum cymbals are fucking out of control. The bass guitar is kind of fucking dumpy. There's a lot of shit on that record that just...
That was one of my questions when we get into mixing and mastering, is that I have heard that you guys were unhappy about how it was, you know, mixed and mastered, and there was a little bit of fight back with the label, so to speak. So did you approach them saying, could you make some changes? Like after you got to, you know, when they gave you like, here it is, it's done. Like essentially it was like you're eating it, right? Essentially.
Yeah.
I think I remember them being pretty stuck in the mud about sending anything back to be redone. Because you're right, it was, you know, even the very beginning of the record, like you hear a little city scene, you know, you hear like cars beeping and I think like a siren for like whatever, like 3.5 seconds, right? And like I think they just kind of went outside the Victory Records like office and just recorded like the street. And it was like, no, it's supposed to be like a you know, like a scene out of I don't know, that, you know, like a 1970s gang movie or something. It's not supposed to be just like one guy beeps his horn, you know, as just so they could get the sound of a city on a record, you know. So there was a lot that there was just a real breakdown of communication between who was doing what, and you know, who was in charge of getting sounds and who was in charge of mixing and mastering and everything. And it's the kind of problem that I don't think would have existed today, right? Like you wouldn't, right. I mean, we didn't even have like text messaging back then. It was like, we didn't have, right.
You know, the first time we heard it, it was in the mail. It was like a physical copy of the CD. And I remember popping it on and just being like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, man. I mean, Dan, you've done a million records. Like when you hear a song or you hear a record that you've done, you hear it 75 times before, you know, right. Like before anyone even thinks about mixing it, you know? So yeah, like you said, in the mail, first time, first listen.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy cool fact to think about these days, that, you know, they used to send it to you.
It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking getting it like that. And I remember being it was like, there was potential for that to kind of be our breakout record. It was going to be the one that was going to be like, we're really on the scene now. Because there was singles on there that would be pushed. There was enough depth there, but just the production it's so bad. And
there's no rhyme or reason to it. You know, like the horns were supposed to be, I remember like we were on we were like a broken record talking to Jim about like the horns need to be like Rocket from the Crypt, right? I think we had like a Rocket from the Crypt album, and we're like, this is basically as close as we want to, you know, get as close as this as we can. And it was just nothing. It was just like low on the mix. That's it.
Right.
That's how you describe the horns on that record. Low on the mix.
Right. And even when you gave them something to look at, you know, because a lot of times I've gone in the studio, like, what do you want? Like, give me something that you want this bass around. Even when you gave them something, they couldn't. So that's what sucks sometimes. And
in the studio, when we were recording, these songs sounded massive. They sounded great because Jim at the Outpost was so good at what he did. But once they got shipped out of his place, we had no control. My guess is Victory went to one of their studios that does like hardcore bands for that time period.
Right.
So it sounds like it. It really does. Like everything is EQ'd like that, and it just it kills me. I mean, like as far as songs that still stand up, what do you think, Dan, for songs that actually kind of worked with that production a little bit?
I mean, I think like the last song was really great. What's in a Dream, I think was kind of like one of the afterthoughts of the record, but I think that song kind of made it through. It's a very simple guitar part, very simple lead guitar part that I think we probably just came up with in the studio.
That was all you. That was your song 100%. Like you wrote and arranged everything on that song.
I think that came out really well for that that kind of vibe. I mean, obviously, Small Town Pride is a great song. It's an anthem. It means a lot to a lot of kids, and people still. And I did love the intro and the first tune. Like I think it did come in, even though the city sound was a little weird. Like I think that it kind of gave, I think a lot of bands were doing this back then too. Like back when people actually wrote like records and people sat and listened to records, like we played the intro from the show that we played, right? So that first track, I forget what we called it on the record, but it's like the song
before the break.
Then before the break, right? It's that was actually what we would open live shows with. And so I think that was really cool. Like a lot of bands, particularly the bands that recorded at the Outpost, would do that. Sort of like, how do you get the crowd pumped up? And so I think that came out really well. The gang vocal sounded good. I think Jake sounded great on the record. Like I think that the horn, I think that the saxophone, there's some songs that sound just fucking awesome. Like 22 Years Old, that song that he played.
Think that one holds up just about that. That's one of the three I had on my list of songs. What's in a Dream, 22 Years Old, and Long Lost Life. I think all three of those hold up really well.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, 22. I love the honking on the bridge of 22 Years that Jake did. I think that was cool. And then
I think he had a Barry sax.
Yeah, the Barry. Yeah, it was a very simple guitar solo that went right after that. So, and I loved Brandon singing too. Not to go all over the map, but all at once. But I love Brandon singing on the Ramones tune that we did.
Oh, 53rd and 3rd.
53rd and 3rd. Yeah, that's a great cover too. I mean. Yeah. Really looking back for me, as someone who heard the album like fresh when it first came out, like, man, like it still was with all these problems that we were talking about with the mixing, it still was a huge statement for me, a listener. And Small Town Pride, which might be the band's biggest hit, it did give you that big push, and all the other songs were great as well, I mean, that's just my listening, because a lot of punk kids, especially me, sometimes I wasn't in a band yet. I didn't know a lot about the mixing. I just heard that it, as it is. So there's that aspect, as musicians are always going to be our worst critics. But hearing it as a young kid, dude, it was still really powerful,
Well, in listening to it today again, the thing that I noticed, I in retrospect, which is crazy because it was the issue that I had, was McCool. You by far were the best thing about that record. Vocally, the performance is spot on. The lyrics are pretty fucking spot on. It's hard to write that subject matter and not make it kind of cheesy and watered down. And it's just clever. It's clever shit, and it's stuff that And at the time, I wish I could go back in history and change that. That I fucking had that issue with it because there was no issue with it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying that, Dan. It was. I think when I think about the sort of lyrical aspect of it and the performance of it, again, I think it was like. I think the thing is for me that I think at the time kind of immediately was a huge self-critic about it. Just because I think, it's writing about subject matter that probably someone who had a little bit more experience in life. This is what I remember thinking about it. Like someone who had a little bit more experience in life maybe would have been a little more articulate about what I was trying to say on that record. And I think the influences of it, you know, around us. Like I remember the big album that was influencing me at the time was that Social D album, White Light, White Heat, White Trash from 1996. You know, just a few years before that. And it was kind of like I was trying. I think that there were times when I was trying to sort of like squeeze Mike Ness kind of attitude into like a record that you know, we didn't have a lot of time to write, and we were recording in a studio that was vastly different from how they recorded. And that, you know, actually, I was in another band several years later, and we brought that record to the producer to be like, can you sort of emulate the sound? And like, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that they did to sort of like to wetten up that sound on that record. And you know, Jim, we didn't bring any of that to Jim, and so I'm kind of doing this performance with this like other record in mind. Our engineer had no idea what that record was. Like we didn't even talk to him about it. So I think like, you know, I appreciate it. And you know, I think that there's some stuff that definitely holds up. But again, I just think like, you know, a record is, it's a pretty intimate thing, right? Like you want everyone to buy in on it. You want to get buy-in from everyone. You want everyone to feel it. You want everyone to hear everyone else, you know, and exactly what they're going to do. And, you know, I think, we were mentioning the Ramones song earlier, and it's funny, we got to talk. I remember we played the Warped Tour the year later, and we talked to I guess it was one of the Ramones was there, and we I guess it was we talked to him on the first day we were there. We're like, oh, we recorded 53rd and Third. He's like, you know what that song's about? And we're like, no, we have no idea. And it's funny because as you did, Dan, I lived in New York for a few years back, and 53rd and Third is like a Dwayne Reed now or something. It's like not at all, you know, it's like not
male prostitution.
Yeah, turning tricks in the late 70s, but yeah.
No, man. I mean, thinking back, so you guys sent it out. How long from when you record it to like when, like back then where labels, you know, you guys were big, how long did it take to get released? You know, now you can just upload it and it's, hey, everyone sees it and hears it. Like, how long to give people kind of a couple months?
It must have been 4 months.
Yeah, we recorded it. It came out in August. Is that right? Or no?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it came out in August, and we recorded it. I don't think it was that long, Dan. I think because I remember recording it and then going on and then we did the Warped Tour, and the Warped Tour is in like July or something. So I think we recorded it in like June, and I know that like Brandon and Chris and probably Eric and maybe a couple other people were in college at the time. So I think we probably did it like at the beginning of the summer. So I think it was pretty quick, you know.
That's cool.
Maybe you're right, but and I guess that the other thing is it's because we got a question in the comments here asking why you weren't in the Small Town Pride video. So the time frame there, it's all very quick.
Yeah, well, I wasn't in the band anymore, so it was the record came out. I think that was the single, and you know, at that point we had parted ways. So it was you know, but it was Dan's song. I mean, Dan had written it about his town and everything, and you know, so it was apt, you know. It kind of made sense, but yeah, great. It's a great video, though. You know, pretty much captured the whole spirit of the time. You know,
we're talking about a year period, but it felt like 5 years. It didn't feel like 1 year, did it?
Yeah, when you're that age, a year does feel like 5 years, right?
Yeah,
I just remember just every single day, it just like thinking about all these different things and these aspects of it. It was only a 1 year span that all that shit happened, and to the end where you know eventually you were gone out of the band.
Yeah. I
don't even remember now what happened that caused that to happen.
You know, it's probably a lot of factors. You know, I think it was frustration about the record. different types of frustrations about the record, you know, from different sides. I think it was like, I think just the vision was different, you know. I think the vision, and you know, when you're 19, 20 years old, and the other thing about it too, I was thinking about recently, we didn't have a manager. A lot of bands of our stature at that point had managers. Right. And managers, like, you know, Dan, you can think of who the managers were for some of the bands, particularly around here, right? Who sort of managed a few bands. And obviously I don't think bands like have managers these days anymore, I don't think, but like, it was a way for like someone kind of to conceive of the whole vision, right? Or not to conceive of it, but at least to kind of like
at least mentor right. What's going on, to be like, no, you know, have we had anyone around us that was older being like, this is how it goes, this is how it is going to be, you shouldn't. We didn't have any of that. No.
I think we got back from the Warped Tour, and I think it was like a matter of a lot of bands that we were playing with and meeting, who were kind of like a notch or two above us on the kind of like, whatever ladder you want to use to you know, popularity or whatever back then. But I think that like all we were kind of doing was like, that was our guide, right? Like we were kind of like, we're in this world. Not that we didn't copy people, but like we were just like, what's the world that we're in? Like, what's the context that we're in, you know? And I think a lot of bands that we were playing with were kind of doing much different stuff than we were doing. Like I said, I think the Playin to Live album was kind of like an Americana sort of concept. And I don't quite think it probably fit like the world that we were in, the bands we were playing with, the kind of venues we were playing, you know, and I think that just made things kind of disorienting, right? And someone like a manager could kind of come in and say like, hey, listen, this is like the vision, kind of stick to the plan on this. This is everyone on the same team, right? Everyone's on board, right? You get a bunch of 19-year-olds, and we had like 7 people in the band, right? Like how many different intermingling relationships is that? How many factions is that? Like how much miscommunication is that, right? Like there were times when we tour and there would be people like at the front of the van, and then there'd be like a different faction in the back of the van, right? Like you don't get that in a power trio. You get that in a band of 7 people. Right. So I don't think it was anyone's fault. I think it was just like when you get that many people, like, and there's no conductor, it's like driving with no lanes. It's like driving with no lanes and no traffic lights, right? That's kind of my feeling of, you know, kind of how that happened.
I think you actually summed it up pretty well. I think having 7 people and everyone split in different camps and talking to each other, it was like Lord of the Flies inside of a van.
And you got to think too, you know, with me playing in bands my whole life too, is like, you know, you're young, there's so many personalities, and probably you guys didn't have that much money, you know, at that time too, which caused stress on okay, you know, what's the payout? There's 7 people in the band. Like, how do you know, even if you get $500 for a gig, you know, 7 people, you know what I mean? I know that's a lot, but how do you pay everyone? And then, you know, you're quitting jobs, you're going on tour. So that it's
to answer that, no one got paid. It all
right
for the band, for gear, gas, like everything went straight back in as a collective, like a co-op kind of deal.
I remember, like, just quick anecdote, but I remember being at the Warped Tour and we get paid $100 a show on the Warped Tour. There's 7 of us, or no, there are 8 of us because we had someone doing merch. So we
it's like it's an army.
Yeah, we had 8 people, 8 people in a 12-passenger van. You know, virtually no budget and no tour support. Like a lot, that was kind of back in the days when bands were getting tour support from the label. And we were, I remember like you'd have to wait in line in a hallway to get paid at the end of the day by whoever at the Warped Tour. And the guy in front of me was the manager from like 311 or something. And I'm like, Jesus, this guy's probably getting 50 grand, you know? And I kind of want to stop and be like, hey, can you give us $1,000? Like no one will notice. You know? We'll be able to eat tonight, you know, or eat at a restaurant or something. So, but yeah. No, at that age, you're going on fumes. You're living off scraps. We did have a lot of nice people take us in and cook us pasta and stuff. Remember that was like a big. Remember that, Dan? Like we had a lot of pasta nights.
Yeah, that was pretty consistent. That was like the one thing that you could kind of guarantee. You know, every other night would be probably some pasta.
Yeah, and just, you know, but yeah, close quarters, you know, and little money. So and again, you know, no conductor. I mean, or a few conductors, right? Like too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, well, it was me and you really. We were the ones really pushing it. Brandon was also part of it, but I think it was the two of us that were more or less running the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, living several states apart, you know, with no way to kind of easily transfer music. I mean, you know, I remember when GarageBand came out, and I remember just kind of saying, like, what year was that? Like 2005 or something, being like, this could have probably solved all of our problems if we had technology like, you know, 5 years ago. You know, just communication.
And then I think about it, right? So the record after Playing to Live, No Good, No Time, No Pride, my first effort trying to sing, pretty fucking bad. Like I was writing all the songs pretty much by myself at that point. You know, there's a couple singles on it, but there's a lot of fucking duds on it too. And it wouldn't be until Hate to Be Loved where the whole band was in a house together for a full year where things really started to move. Where part-time bands, it's so difficult, really. And I now that we're talking about this, it does make all the sense why we struggled on a lot of those fronts during Playing to Live.
Now, when you guys were playing live, was there a song off the record that you just like loved to play live besides maybe like Small Town Pride, but like was there always a song that was off the record that you guys were like, this is fun to play, always gets me pumped, you know?
I think
during this time.
Yeah, I think we did a tour. We toured with Darkbuster to the West Coast and back. And I think for me, that was kind of like the big tour. Yes. It was funny because it was before the record came back, and that was when if I remember correctly, I might be wrong. I think it was like the Warped Tour dates were on that tour, or maybe it was separate. I don't remember, but the point being, yeah, I think we did like "Gotta Get It," like the second song on the record. I
was going to say the same thing. That was one of those tracks that never got played after that. That was like the one time that it got played, and it was fun as hell. But obviously, after you were gone, a lot of these songs we weren't able to play.
Yeah, it was a good. I remember that song being on that tour a lot. And the guys in Darkbuster, like, I remember they loved that song. Like, if we ever had a show that had like two people at it, Darkbuster would come over and they'd sing along to that one, you know, because it's just woes on the chorus, so you can't go wrong. You know, you hear that 5 nights in a row, and you pretty much know the woes are coming, you know, coming up next, even if you don't know the lyrics. So, but yeah, that was a tune we played on that tour. I remember. I don't remember any other. Well, we do 53rd and 3rd. I think we would do that before. If I remember correctly, I think we did that before we even wrote the record. Because it was, you know, it was a cover, so it was easy to just kind of bang it out. But yeah, I don't know, Dan. What do you think? Were there any other tunes that we would kind of play at that time? Friday Salvation, maybe? I don't know.
I don't even know if we played that. I'm trying to think. Like it all kind of blurs.
6 a.m. I always like that.
AM.
Oh yeah.
I really love too. Daddy Was a Drunk.
Daddy Was a Drunk.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, those two right there, fucking still so good. Like, honestly, like, there's still a lot of those songs outside of, you know, of Small Town Pride that are still hitting hard, even fucking 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's all good. And it really makes me think that I just grew up an hour away from White River, but hearing those tunes, like, I feel like I was born in White River Junction. You know, I feel like every time I go play the Main Street Museum, like, fucking boom, it's on, you know?
Yeah. Where did you get that shirt, Nick, by the way? Have you had that for 20 years, or did you?
I think Dan got this for me years ago. Pretty sure you're like, yo, you have one of these? And I was like, no. He's like, okay.
That was probably like 7 years ago. It was when the band kind of dissolved, and after the reunion, I'm assuming it would have been whatever stuff, because I forgot to bring merchandise. It would have been the leftover stuff from the original run.
Yeah.
That was it. That's a great album cover too. That's Dan playing.
Great.
Yeah, that was taken in my basement when I remember taking those pictures on
that's cool.
camera.
Yeah, that was last minute. We didn't have an album cover, and boom.
Yeah.
You know, I think going back, you know, to you know, with Victory, you know, there's such a like they were such a label that everyone knew, and I think that, you know, a lot of the punks didn't realize that there was still probably so many bands doing so much DIY stuff, even though they were on like a major label. Like, I think people, especially at that time, got that mixed up. You know, like, oh, they're on Victory, they're all set, and it's like
100%.
you know, and I'm like, dude, they're taking pictures, you know, album covers in their basement. They're, you know, they're recording and sleeping at, you know, their parents' house. You know, it's like everyone just had this thing when, you know, the early 2000s, all these labels coming out. They're like, they're in hotels and these punk bands are, you know, I remember going to see Anti-Flag, and the kids around me were so mad because they're like, the band didn't set up their gear. Some dude came in and pushed it. They were so pissed. They didn't even want to watch the show because they're like, why aren't they out there putting their amps together? And I just remember like, fuck, all right, here we go. So
it's funny. I actually think the opposite. I saw Built to Spill last year, and I remember they came out and they tuned their own guitars and kind of stood there awkwardly for like 3 minutes. And I was like, I was angry at that. I was like, who the fuck?
right.
You know? I was like the opposite. I was like, I don't want DIY here. I'm here to see like one of my favorite bands. You know, I want it to be a production.
Surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's true, Nick. There was a lot of that sense of like, I mean, we would get shit from. I think the scene. I think the punk world at that time was like a lot of, because there were so many punk bands getting famous.
Right.
I think there were a lot. I think that there was just a lot of like angling to kind of be like, well, this band's not legitimate because of this. This band's not legitimate because of this. It was really competitive. It was. I mean, that's how I remember it. I remember it being like a real rat race. You know, like. Not that the music wasn't enjoyable in and of itself, which made up for it, obviously, you know, but it was there was a lot of shit. I mean, people would, you know, we get kind of picked on for that stuff sometimes. And it would be like, dude, if you want to go get signed to a label, go fucking work hard. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, having that label was, it pretty much put our foot in the door to do some cool shit that otherwise it probably would have been pretty tough, but we got lucky. Early on, I sent out 1 million demo tapes and with songs that I thought people would enjoy, and it you know, panned out for the most part.
Yeah.
Should we open it up to some questions maybe in the comments?
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, you know, we got one from my buddy Robin here. Does Victory Records still own this record? As far as I know, they do. Any chances of a vinyl release? Probably not. I wish we could get the masters and actually remix it. I would put up $2,000 to have someone remix that.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder if those exist. I don't even know.
I think they did sell Victory Records, so you should really check in for real to see what that means for the records you guys put out. You know what I mean? Who owns them? Are they up? You know, because he sold like most of it, didn't he? A couple of years ago. He sold like a lot of that. So I don't know where that lies now. Maybe you can't, but fuck. A couple of emails might prove that wrong.
Yeah. Like BMI who owns it or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a major label, like a big group that owns it now that's kind of under an umbrella. So maybe they would just be like, fucking give us some money because you guys aren't making a shit anyways. So, I think we're taking off the Victory Records, like, you know, alumni shit. So it's possible. I don't know. I definitely thought. Another question here. How did Drew Paley end up playing guitar with the Rebels?
Well, what band was he in before? Wasn't he in a band? What band was he in?
Well, he was in hardcore bands up in Burlington, Vermont. Was it Common Ground? No.
Not
In Reach.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Spencer, he was with Spencer up in Burlington.
And Bobby were in that band.
Yeah. I believe he was in Reach, and pretty much he was a scene dude that we knew, and a talented guy and someone that could help out on guitar. And And I mean, he did help a lot. He was a great guitar player, great live, and he was really short-lived though. I mean, he's on the record, and then pretty much he was gone shortly after that.
Drew had that like Davey Havoc look going on. I remember that was like
Oh, he was obsessed with AFI.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And now the best part about Drew Paley is that he pretty much spaces himself from River City Rebels. So like anything that's mentioned or like his name is connected to, he like deletes. And
Really?
yeah,
No kidding.
he got weird about Wikipedia always pulling that shit down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was a great guitarist though. He definitely like fit the times, you know.
Great singer too. Like he was just a weapon to have. You know, all of us could sing, so it was nice to have all these backing vocals.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. By the way, speaking of Victory Records, Dan, do you remember Kara from Victory Records? Kara, Victory Records. Does that ring a bell?
Blonde hair.
No, she was like brunette, curly hair. Her name was Kara.
Hmm.
Random kind of factoid, but I just as you know, I work on political campaigns now, and a couple of years ago, she was I was at a fundraiser for this person running for the House, and it was ended up being Kara Eastman. She was at some like fundraiser in Massachusetts at like someone's house. There was like a congressman there, and she showed up and we got to chatting, and she's like, "Oh, I'm from Chicago, blah blah blah." I'm like, "Oh, you know, I used to hang out in Chicago." And yeah, she's like, "Oh, I work at Victory Records." I was like, "No shit." I was like, "I used to like order posters from you." But she almost you know, whenever we're playing a show or something, playing a town, I'd have them delivered to the, you know, to the venue. And but it was Kara Eastman. She was like a national story a couple years ago for like a week, because she's like a Bernie-esque like you know, like Medicare for all kind of progressive, and so it's pretty, you know, small world kind of thing. But
it is a small
Yeah,
world.
that's cool.
I mean, it's a really neat story.
yeah,
As far as the old Victory people, there's like one that I still stay in touch with all these years later, and that was like our radio guy.
oh yeah,
Tim is the only one out of all
cool.
of those that you know is still supporting, you know, the cause, and still just a good dude.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, people there were helpful, like in terms of just like if we needed something. That was, you know, to go back to that discussion just for a second, it was like that was the thing too about being on a label, is like you could be playing somewhere in the middle of Idaho and you could be like, "Hey, can you mail out posters or promos to this thing to the local like record store and venue and things like that?" I mean, that was kind of like a neat thing to have, you know, back then. And you'd call on the phone and ask them to do that. You know?
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah.
We got another question. Did you guys ever play a Victory Records label show?
We did.
What do you remember of this show?
Well, there's a record of it. We played at Bowery Electric with like all these super
Scarhead.
Yeah,
They're all hardcore bands.
Like all these hardcore bands. It was like, I don't know.
All Out War, maybe.
Yeah, it was. We were a little bit out of place because we were, you know, as we know, like it was basically us and Catch-22 as the non-hardcore bands at the time. I don't think there was any other non-hardcore bands. So yeah, and it was a CD. It was called NYC Takeover, and you are playing guitar on the cover of it, Dan. There's like a collage, and you're playing.
Yeah, well, it was released on vinyl in Australia, and I have a copy of that actually.
And no shit!
It was for CMJ Music Festival, is what it was.
Wow.
CMJ 2000, right? Yeah.
It was a showcase.
Lincoln's gonna want that. Lincoln's gonna want that.
That's a hard one to find. That showcase was awful. I remember us playing first, and all these hardcore dudes were just like, nope, you guys are fucking green. We can tell. It was. I'm sure in retrospect we embarrassed the shit out of ourselves, but you know, that was our first time in New York City.
The recording's pretty good though.
Yeah, it doesn't sound bad. And Ward was still singing, so
yeah, it was a good recording.
He was staring at the fucking floor the whole time. It was great.
Well, you know what? It did go better. I wasn't even there, but it did go better than this past week's New York City hardcore show with Madball. The super spread.
We'll see.
Oh, Jesus.
I plead the fifth on that one.
I know.
I didn't go or anything, but I plead the fifth in terms of the.
I know. It's just a joke. I don't really have a thing on it either way, but I do like some of the bands that played for sure. It got kind of out of hand with comments on the internet, but
Yeah.
Sure, but
Let's put it this way: people are pent up. You know.
yeah, that's exactly what it was. Oh, was Strife on Victory too?
sure was.
Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
I think.
And there's
yeah.
band called Aiden was on this screamo band. Aiden.
That was much later. That was much later.
That was later. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Victory kind of turned into. I mean, Victory is such an interesting, just kind of history because it was really. I remember getting samples when I was in like 9th grade. It was like I was in 1997 or something, and you would just get, it was like Blood for Blood. I don't. Maybe it was like Sheer Terror or something. It was like a lot of those. Like Awkward Thought was one of the bands, and then Catch 22 was like, what? Catch 22? It doesn't make any sense. And then they signed us, and then they became like a huge. Well, I mean, the bands that kind of launched them were like Taking Back Sunday, Thursday, and then they just
Atreyu. It was all the emo pop shit.
Yeah.
Which eventually, long after you were gone, I had my fill of those bands, and I called the label drunk one night and told them how I really felt about all this. That's how we got out of the contract. They just like, fuck these.
Is it
guys.
really? Are you serious? Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I called up the label after one show because I had heard the label was pushing these other bands, even though people were calling to interview us. They're like, no, interview Thursday, and then you can do maybe the Rebels later. I found out and I lost it, and it was the same deal. It's fucking stupid. But in some ways it was good, some ways it was bad. Keepsake of Luck never would have happened had I not ran my mouth and got us released out of the contract. So
yeah. It's funny, man. Like the label, it was really it was a double-edged sword, It was constricting, yet gave us options, It's like at the time it was like really it felt like being on Victory was the key to everything, like just in terms of exposure. But it really did. It was interesting, like it was good and bad, and like there was a lot of music back then. Like I remember there's a lot of music, a lot of punk music about like fuck big labels and all this stuff. And like now the big labels don't exist anymore, or they exist in some bastardized form, and it's like, well, people have a hard time getting their music out now.
Yeah.
So
Especially touring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just crazy times, just in general. I think back, and like I said, I wish we could have done some things different, but for the most part, I do stand behind it. That the aesthetics of that record, Playin to Live, still look great. The music mix, not so much. Like I said today, after listening to it, the vocal stuff is great. Even the backup vocal stuff, I'm like, wow, that was pretty on par too. With not a lot of bands were going to be able to pull something like that off.
Yeah. No, there were definitely some things that came together, like and stood the test of time. I think, it's the record. The record holds up well, I think.
Yeah,
like
I think so too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think out of the whole catalog, for me, it sits like it's in the middle of the catalog, but like a solid middle where it's it's much better than No Good No Time No Pride. Much better.
Well, do you think that there was any like continuity between those two records? Like, what do you think from the first record, the Racism Religion record, to that one was definitely a break, I feel like, right? Like it was just a different, it was like a different purpose or something to the record, like it was not, the first record was kind of like street punk, with some kind of like ska influence, but this was kind of an attempt at an Americana record. But I wonder, like, how would lay the groundwork for any future records, or
Yeah, I mean, it definitely laid the ground for essentially what was going to become Keepsake of Luck is what I wanted Playin to live to be.
oh, interesting, yeah,
So
yeah,
essentially, had I known how to achieve that music wise, because I had no clue. I mean, we didn't. Fuck, I was just thinking about this. I think you were the only person you had to do your own harmonies on the album because no one knew how to do harmonies.
oh, probably, yeah, because
You
we
did.
didn't have any demos, yeah, 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 that's wild.
So that's crazy. Now and like now it's like, yeah, I'll do harmonies with anyone, no problem. But back
Yeah.
then it was like you were the only one that kind of knew what was going on. So musically you were miles ahead of us in that regard.
I think we all learned a lot from doing that record. I mean, the thing I came away from that record with was like, uh, you know, like relationships are hard. Like many different, like having many different levels of cooperation is difficult. Like I don't think I was ever in a band that had that many people again. Did RCR continue to have that many people like over the years?
Yeah, we pretty much had 7 members in the band pretty consistently until
Uh,
2007, 2008. So it
Huh.
was years and years of having a full roster. And obviously members were coming and going, but it was always still 7 to 8 people on the road.
Yeah. 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 The members coming, right. There was a lot of people who kind of like filled the roles and came in and left and everything. But um, yeah. I wonder, like, I always think about RCR kind of like, and just sort of like what was the continuous thing in that band? I mean, obviously you as a member were the continuous member, and but I just, the vision seemed to change so much, like which is pretty rad. Like like I play in a band now and I want to write a completely different record from the first one, and I feel like that's just most people would just start another band,
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
it's all rock and roll. I mean, I was writing a lot of these songs musically at least, and I'm like, these are the same 3 chords. I'm just playing a different rhythm, adding
right.
a different little part to it, but it's still the same 3 chords over and over. That's why anyone that would say, "Oh, it's not this, it's not that," I'm like, I haven't changed anything. It's all the same shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like as well too. Like I love bands like the Ramones that are like kind of have the same formula, but like at the same time, when a band has played for so long, like the Rebels, like do you want to hear the same song or the same type of version of it? Like Alkaline Trio, I love them, but dude, the tricks have been all tricked out, and now when I hear any, I'm like, it's just you can't, It gets to the point where it's just like, all right, it's like beyond kind of like surprised. It's boring, you know.
Yeah.
Hearing an Alkaline Trio with the same 3, natural harmonics, and the chord,
Well, it was just the instrumentation too. Like RCR changed its instrumentation over the years. Like that's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about it is you can always like, if you can find a way to make that flow, like you said, Dan, like it's the same, it might be the same 3 chords. It might be the same, like, well that you're drawing from, like creatively. But I think like when you add just different, like just kind of different layers and different kind of, with the strings that came about eventually. And, I think that there were different horns, right? There was like a trombone and a trumpet.
Playing the keys and playing organ and stuff like that. That changed everything too, and harmonica. So
Harmonica, yeah.
like three different like major lineups in RCR's history that kind of made this thing happen. And it's weird. I was thinking about today too. There's how many members of RCR are out there, that were part of this whole thing. It's got to be bigger than any other band out there, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, the reunion show we did in 2014, I think there was like RCR was representing like 9 states or something like that.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Like that's, from the West Coast to the East and all over. It was just, it was people all over the place. And, you know, when you, I mean, Dan, you should do like a genealogy on that or something. It's probably more complicated, like, you know,
Oh,
doing the family, you know, tree. It's just people. You go all the way back to when you were before the Rebels, you know, like there's probably like 35, 40 people, right? Like, I don't know, or 30 maybe, I think.
I would say probably about 40 people, if I had to guess, that have, you know, gone on tour with us and been part of the operation at one point. Yeah, it's a big number, and
Yeah,
I'm kind of proud of that. That it's like, you know, all these alum members,
yeah,
and
and you should be. Yeah,
everyone should be proud of it. I mean, we did something, we created something that shouldn't have been there, and we did it, and we staked our claim and had a good time doing it, and that spirit's still alive. And the offer is always open. If you or Brandon ever want to be part of RCR, the door is always open. I don't care what you want to do. You come in and you play. You play anything you want. I don't give a shit.
I think before COVID, there was some talk. I mean, because I was talking to you, or I think about going up there at one point.
Yeah, no, I still want. But I felt like you were down, and you know, maybe Brandon was a little hesitant, and I understand. But
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like it could be the sort of thing that's just like around forever, you know, like, I mean, why not, you know? And it's not only, I just think that there's been so many different iterations of it. You guys have lived in so many different places, you know, Vermont, New York City, West Coast, you know, California, Washington,
Seattle, yeah.
New Hampshire, you know, it's been all over. You know, it's somehow just kind of kept the wheels on, you know, and I think like, you know, I think the older I get, the more kind of creative projects I do, whether it's music or art or comedy or anything like that. It's like there's always got to be a constant drive. There's always got to be someone who's driven, you know, to kind of keep it together and actually has the spirit of the thing, you know, like you got the Holy Spirit in you, you know, of this band, and that's what you need, and there's no reason for it ever to end, you know. And you know, I'd like to think that Playin to Live was some kind of positive rupture on that timeline. You know, like I think it got the band probably away from the kind of straight street punk stuff, and I love the street punk stuff. I mean, you know, I love Rancid and like all that stuff. You know, it's kind of like my favorite stuff. But you know, I think that the band has just gone in so many different directions since then, and it's great, you know. And like you were saying, Nick, like that's, you know, like there's a lot of bands that just they put the same record out over and over again, and they're fine with that, you know, and that's cool. But
right,
you know,
and I also think too, Playin to Live. I actually have a Playin to Live tattoo. I don't know if you guys can see it. Oh, wow. I got that when I was like 18. But anyways, I think after this record, you all probably, you know, as a listener, and you could say that like the door was open to everything, you know, like, cause like you took street punk, you could still do that, you know, but you could also say, okay, I can do A, B, and C. So like it almost opened the floodgate of what was to come even later, even like, you know, because once you have options and you know it, that ticks, your mind starts ticking. And then I think that may be what could have been, you know, just on the outside looking in, kind of.
Could do all kinds of genres, you know. You could do free, you know, acid jazz or
yeah.
I mean, it's only limited by whoever's currently in the lineup. You know, that's always been the case, where it's like you work with. I don't care how talented you are, if the heart's there and you have the drive, you can make it work.
Absolutely.
100%. You just have to play 3 notes and pretend that you can play a lot more, but just master those 3 and fake it, and everyone's going to buy it because live we're going to sell it really well. And I think that's what we did for years and years, you know.
Yeah, it's all about the feeling, and that's what's beautiful about punk rock, and that's why we're all sitting here, older dudes, like talking about how beautiful that is, because it is about the energy, and it's a family. You know, again, talking about how many people were in the bands, like those are like, it's like being in a gang. Like RCR is a huge family, but you're all related you know, for this one thing that's rock and roll. You know, you all have that one thing connect.
Well, you spend that much time in a van with people too.
Yeah.
It is like family. I mean, Dan,
Yeah.
you're, you know, it's like I see you and it's like, yeah, it's a brother. You know, it's
Right.
not. If you know, if I was there, I'd be like, hey, can I crash? I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. I don't give a shit.
Right.
It's like it's old. We know each other. It's not. There's no difference there. It's just we're older now, and you know, maybe a little bit more, you know, more mature, but that's about it.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely, man. I mean, this record means a lot to a lot of people, and I think too, like you guys, you know, probably don't even know the scope of you know what it's done for people. You ever think like, because I was that dude like in high school, like listening to this, and I had my MP3 where I had burned CDs. But when you're making a record, you don't realize that, you know, Nick Grandchamp has his MP3 player walking home from school with it on. Like, you ever think how many times that has happened with the music you produced? You know, where it was, you know, some parents are fighting and some kids got, you know, the rebels on. I always think that's such a crazy thing to think about, that like we talk about the mixing, you know, stuff, but you're like, man, like it helps people you don't even know, and they might not even, you know that, you know, how important
it goes back to the small town pride thing. That probably is the biggest song we ever did, and it did connect to, I mean, just thousands of kids that believed it, and to the point where, you know, there's tattoos all over the fucking country with kids, you know, getting that tattoo in honor of that song and what we were bringing to the table, and saying, hey, it's okay if you were born in a spot that doesn't have a scene or a community. You're not alone. You're with us.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the tours we did, we would, for that, you know, right before that record was, we would hit up all these small towns all over the country, and kids would drive from, you know, 90 miles away, you know, 100 miles away to go, you know, shows in Idaho and Montana and, you know, the Mountain West. I mean, those were, man, those were special. Like, you're not going to see like Anti-Flag play in the middle of Idaho, you know?
Right.
Like, I mean, I don't know, maybe you would, but we the point is we prided ourselves on that, you know? And I think that was a unique thing, you know?
And what's cool about the small towns, and my experience with playing music, is that a lot of the times these shows is like the biggest thing. And, you know, they go to school and they talk about this show that's happening, and it's like the biggest thing. So like everyone comes, you know, you've got all sorts of, you got the rednecks kind of coming because, you know, it's just a thing, you know, and like Littleton, New Hampshire, like some of the craziest shows I've ever played were at the Eagles clubs in Bethlehem, New Hampshire. Even it's just like middle of nowhere, Bethlehem. You drive just next to a Christmas tree farm, and there's fucking 300 kids. You know, it's a beautiful thing.
Awesome. So another question: what do you think the album after Playin to Live would have been if McCool didn't leave the band?
You know, I think I can only speak for me and like where my trajectory at the time. Like, I think that the next record probably would have been an attempt to get right what that record was supposed to be. Like, I think it would have been much closer to the kind of sound of like a mid-90s, like Social D, like Americana, you know, sort of vibe to it. Like, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like if I had as much creative input on a next record, that's probably what it would have been, you know, aspiring to anyway, you know. And then after that, who knows? I mean, again, you know, I think that it's, you know, the River City Rebels as an entity has ADD, right? It always wants to change its kind of flavor. So who knows after that? But I think if we had gotten back to writing soon after that, I think that that's kind of what it would have been, you know?
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. Jeff says it put Vermont on the map. Yeah, I think we probably, you know, as far as the punk across the country, there wasn't a whole lot of bands coming out of Vermont, kind of making it known that they were from Vermont and out there touring.
Yeah, I feel like there was more. Yeah, like it was definitely like a scene unto itself, you know, in and of itself. It's definitely cool. Yeah.
Now, do you guys remember during this time of the record, did you all have a roadie that was always around, or was it kind of a, group, effort where someone would come on the road and then a different person? Or was there one set dude that was always like, yo, put me in a band?
We had Tommy Mohawk.
Yeah.
And Tommy, and was Patty Bowe before he was in the band? Was he ever?
No, my brother Josh would do it.
Oh yeah, Josh
toured with us a few times.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah, I don't think
That's
we
cool.
had. I think we usually had someone doing merch, but I can remember a lot of times kind of playing and running to go behind the table, which is it's cool, but it's also kind of like it's weird, it's like I just played.
If you want to give me some money, like this isn't weird.
Like I'm sweating and I was just in your face singing, and now I'm just talking to you, and it's weird, We'd always try to bring somebody.
Yeah.
Oh, another question I had. On stage with the full lineup, was it hard giving each other space with that many people, with the horns and everything, like playing a show? Was there a lot of times where you're like, oh shit, I just knocked someone over because you're all doing your thing, but some of these clubs, you must not have had a lot of room, to fit a whole band like that on,
Well, Dan, you saw that I posted the Warped Tour video of us.
Yeah, it was at Randall's Island.
It was the one in Milwaukee, I thought.
Oh no, I didn't see
Wisconsin. The Business had just played before us. It was out.
Yeah. Oh shit, that's so funny.
I posted that one of the songs from that, and we're tearing it up. I mean, we were working that stage pretty good.
Yeah. No, I do remember that show actually, because we had the Midwest dates, and we played right after the Business, because I remember Mickey Fitz was who you passed away 10 years ago or something, but he was in his thick Cockney accent was like he's like, oh, my son loves Blink-182, he's like get me an autograph. He's like, get me an autograph from Blink-182. I was like, man, I don't know Blink-182. But I remember playing right after them, and that was a great warm up, because I used to love the Business back then. I was into some of that kind of Oi stuff and everything, and that was a great show. I think I said it was like such a cliche band joke or something, but I think that was one of the shows where I said hello to the wrong city or something. It was either Indianapolis or something like that. I don't know if you had the full show.
I do have the full show, but I only uploaded the one song.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was one of the Midwestern shows, and I said hello to the wrong city, and I did it 3 times. But anyway,
I'm glad there's not a whole lot of footage out there from that time.
No, there's not.
Sadly, because this is before iPhones and even flip phones, flip video cameras. So it's like you had to have the whole setup.
That is a big regret I always had about the band, is that we never got, we weren't big on picture taking. And I feel like there was a lot of bands that had photographers, not hired photographers, but friends or whatever, who would kind of document everything. And obviously it was before the days when, there was anything, there was much to do with those things. There wasn't social media. So, but yeah, that's cool though, Dan. Did you just post? Where did you just post that online?
That was a while ago. It's on the Rebel Gaming Club channel. So
sweet.
I forget what song it even is, but if you look up, River City Rebels Warped Tour, I'm pretty sure it pops up. I'll find it after this and send it your way. But it was good. It was archived because it was on a VHS for years, and I thought I lost it, and I found it, and I backed it up during the pandemic.
Nice. It's a nice find.
Along with the first RCR show that we played, years before too.
Okay, I think I had seen that. That was a talent show, right?
Yeah, it was a battle of the bands.
A battle of bands, yeah.
Wow. You guys sounded pretty fucking good too for a high school band. I mean, the thing is, it's it really, I started my first band in high school too, and it's it really, you don't know what you do. A lot of us didn't know what we were doing back then, so any sense of rhythm at all is like, hooray. You know?
Luck how we had guys that had rhythm right away, so we were okay in that department. That was about it.
Yeah, how did you get so many talented players like to right away? Like you were 17 when you started it, right? Like what's the just kind of fall in?
I lucked out with Eric, you know.
Yeah.
Eric was a
Chris
solid
J.
drummer.
Chris
And Chris
J's.
J was the rival musician from the other high school that I was like, fuck that dude, you know. His band. I'm like, oh, you want to play with me though?
Yeah, man. Eric was tight. Eric was, you know, particularly in those days, you were generally you were only as bad as your drummer, right? In those days, because there was a lot, you know, I feel like to be a good drummer, you got to play for many, many years, you know? And so obviously if you're like 20 years old, you probably haven't played for that long, you know?
He was solid though. He held it down and you know, hit hard and, you know, gave it his all. So I mean,
Yeah.
that was part of that success, you know, and getting signed and all that stuff was because of him, 100%.
For sure.
Yeah, Lincoln's saying he's never seen any footage of McCool singing. So once again, I'll post it on my Facebook as well of that footage. It's great. It looks great. There's fucking dust flying up from the pit. It looks great. You know, we sound really good. And, fucking me and Drew are like spinning at the same time, and aesthetically, it looks real nice.
Nice. The old guitar spinning move. Yeah.
Yep.
Used to play really down low too, Dan. You used to have that Les Paul down to your knees.
Yeah.
I remember that the first show that I saw the Rebels was in Gloucester, at the Gloucester Art Space.
Oh, I played that place before.
That was a big space. There's a lot of hardcore shows and stuff.
With that
And that was the night. That was the night where I got my nickname from you, McCool.
The Big Bopper.
Oh.
Because I think I was like, because I saw the spinny move, and I was like, you're like bopping around on stage up there. You're like the Big Bopper up there, you know?
Oh. Interesting.
Fucking
There's
stuff.
that band called Kermit's Finger, that Boston band. I don't know if you're still around. I played with them in the Gloucester Art Space. Fuck. I had a broken ankle. Then there's a picture of me playing with a broken ass ankle, like 2005.
You didn't play with the Lame Brains, did you?
I don't know.
Tango.
Did they do the tango?
Yeah, Lame Brain Tango, man.
Oh no!
Greatest punk song ever written. Shittiest punk I've ever heard.
I'm glad that we both connect so hard on that, where it's like all these years later, it's like the one thing that like the Run to the Litter CD compilations, that is the only thing that sticks out.
Kermit's Finger, the first show I ever set up was in Stoughton at the VFW, right next to the Outpost, actually. And long story short, I got accosted by the guy in Kermit's Finger because they were supposed to play. We were all like 14 and we were supposed to play, and they were like in their 20s, which was, you know, they were the old timers. And we had to shut down the night before they got a chance to play. And I remember the guy got in my face.
Oh man.
So
Yeah, I remember that band.
yeah, they were a silly hardcore band or silly punk band.
So, all right, we've been at it for an hour and 23 minutes. This has been fun. Any closing thoughts, Dan, on anything that we said?
You know, I did want to say just at some point, not to get too mushy about it, but I feel like with a lot of stuff I'm doing now in life, like I just feel like this, you know, that era and putting together that record as imperfect as it was, and as kind of as troubled as those times were in some ways. I think, like, you know, I have great memories of it. I think it built confidence, you know, like for stuff I did later in life. And I think it really built like organizational skills, like, and, you know, Dan, I see how organized you are. I mean, putting all this stuff together, it takes a certain type of personality to do that. And I feel like we've always shared that, you know, that kind of like type A, you know, kind of going for it, making sure you're organized, making sure you're like, you know, doing it 110%, never doing anything half-assed. So that's kind of what I bring forth now. And I remember kind of learning those skills in that day, you know. I mean, I work in politics. I went to school for that and everything. And people are like, oh, how did you get into this? And I'm like, honestly, it's not even from going to school for it. I mean, it's part of it, obviously, but it's really from like running basically a small business when you're in your late teens, early 20s is like, you know,
Right.
whenever I have students, I'm like, who are not making it, I'm like, you got to go join a band or like tour or something. That's the shit that's going to get you like tight on your organizational, your communication, your presentation skills. Like, so that's kind of my memory of it. And obviously, like, I'm proud as hell that we got to make that record together, you know, and I can't believe it's 20 years, and I've had a lot of different angles on that record, and I'm sure I'll have many more, you know, over the years, because it was just such a special project, you know. So and I'm really impressed with everything that you guys are doing here on the show. I mean, it's really, really cool, you know. It seems like an outgrowth of all the work you did in the band. So you know, so salute, you know.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and I agree.
Thanks,
I
man.
100% what you said. It's, you know, that was the beginning of us getting serious as young adults on trying to figure out how to work and how to be organized 100%. And I'm just amazed we were able to do it at that age with no experience. It just, you know, it really did pave the way to say, hey, we can do this. We can do this seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for making a, you know, 18-year-old kid stoked in a small town. Like, you know, man, I mean, I think of those early years for me, if there wasn't people making music like you guys were doing it and putting forth the effort, I mean, what would my life be like now? I probably wouldn't have played in bands. I don't know. So is again, you know, it's just kind of you know, what I try to do now is honor the people who influenced me, because I'm hoping to honor some kid, you know, that can play, you know, and want to play and inspire. So.
Well, that's nice to hear, Nick. Thank you for that, and you know, to both of you and Dan for everything you're doing. Really appreciate it. So it's great talk.
And like I said, the offer is, you're going to come up and play on the record, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Let me know what's going on. I'll you know, I'll definitely make it work.
We're hoping we're hoping to get something done by the end of the summer, because these you know, vaccines are coming, and hopefully everyone can get in a room, because the songs we already rehearsed, so we just got to get tight on them because we haven't practiced, but because of COVID.
Yeah.
But
let me know. For sure.
So, yeah, guys, thanks so much. Dan, I'll obviously be in touch, and thanks to everyone that's tuned into this episode, and hopefully you had fun breaking down, you know, and listening to these stories about Playin to Live. So now we have it archived forever. So in 20 years from now, when we have no memories of anything, we can go back to
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Have a good night, guys.
Yep.
Oh, Dan left. Oh,